Please give a very warm welcome to conference. Rhowch groeso cynnes iawn I Stephen Flynn.
Pnawn da. I've been practicing that all afternoon. Come on, there we go, there we go. Thank you, thank you. Conference, I'm genuinely humbled and honoured to have been invited along to address you today. And, you know, as I took the train along the coast and spotted beautiful wind farms, castles, plenty of sheep, it felt a little bit like I was going back to Aberdeen. But, of course, there is a huge difference between where we are and Aberdeen because the sun always shines back home in Scotland. But friends, let me begin by paying tribute to my Plaid colleagues in Westminster. It's not easy to stand out in the House of Commons, but in Liz Saville-Roberts, Howell Williams and Ben Lake, Wales's voice is always heard. They are they're a testament to your party and to your nation. And I, like you, should be confident that they can add to their numbers at the general election this year. And friends, under the leadership of Reen, you could not be better led going into that general election. Confident, engaging, and positive about Wales's future. What a contrast to the dire status quo politics of the Labour and Conservative parties. But conference, before I move on to talk a little bit more about that, I do feel it is important to put on record my own party's appreciation and thanks for the now former First Minister Mark Drakeford. From a SNP perspective, Mark was an increasingly rare figure in the Labour Party. He was a strong defender of devolution. And as Reen himself was astutely said, he will be remembered as a serious First Minister for very serious times. Without straying too far or delving too deep into Welsh domestic politics, all I would say is that I suspect Mark Drakeford might be a difficult act for someone to follow. And given that context, I've got no doubt that the day is edging ever closer when Wales will elect a Plaid Cymru First Minister. No pressure, Reen, no pressure, no pressure. Friends, from the moment I became the SNP leader at Westminster, I was eager and proud to maintain the closest of working relationships with our Plaid Cymru colleagues. Liz and I speak on a very regular basis, and I'm forever grateful for her sage words and strong advice. And that close working relationship matters. It especially matters when our voices are the only major voices in Westminster talking about the biggest issues. And of course, in recent months, there has been no more important issue than the horrific situation in Gaza and Israel. And I am proud of the fact that not once, but twice, it was the SNP and Plaid MPs who jointly brought forward motions demanding that Westminster end its equivocation, end its silence, and press for an immediate ceasefire. But friends, for every ounce of pride I feel that we acted and were on the right side of history, I feel far more shame, anger, and despair at a Westminster Parliament that continues to fall silent and sit on its hands. And you know what? The next steps, they're crystal clear. Stop arms sales to Israel and vote for an immediate ceasefire at the United Nations. And I give all of you this guarantee. That's what every SNP and Plaid MP working together will keep pressing at Westminster for. You know, I'm very conscious that right now, as I speak, a vote is actually happening in the UN Security Council. And I hope and expect that the UK government will finally do the right thing, to stop with that equivocation, to stop abstaining, and finally use its vote, as it should, for an immediate ceasefire. Friends, given that I've slagged them off once or twice recently, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different and quote Sir Keir Starmer, so you will need to bear with me, because there is something we apparently agree on, and I suspect that some of you might agree too, because not that long ago, Sir Keir said, and I quote, "People are right to be angry with Westminster. I couldn't agree more." And why wouldn't people be angry? More than a decade of austerity, the chaos of Brexit, multiple mad and bad prime ministers, a cost of living crisis made in Westminster, directionless drift in a declining, disunited kingdom. So Sir Keir, he was finally right about one thing. But what he seems to totally miss, and what he needs to wake up to, is that when people say they are angry at Westminster, that includes him too. The Tories and the Labour Party, they are the fundamental pillars of that palace. And one of the main reasons that people are angry is this. Because when people look at Westminster, what they see is a cosy consensus. They don't see hope or change. People are angry, and rightly angry, because Westminster does not work for them. Both our parties know that it doesn't work. It's a knowledge that's fundamental part of our DNA. And you know, more and more people in Scotland and in Wales too, they know it as well. And in fairness, the Irish, they figured it out a century ago. And it has to be said, in fairness, I don't believe that Westminster works for working people in England either. And friends, the reality of that broken Westminster system reveals itself all the time. Recent weeks have shown the damaging threats of a Tory government led by Rishi Sunak. But it has also exposed, as the Institute for Fiscal Studies themselves have said, that Labour's spending plans are identical in effect to the Tories. The narcissism of small differences is now all that divides them. In fact, it's becoming clear that the focus at the general election will be spent figuring out what major policies they actually disagree on. Because both Sir Keir and Rishi Sunak have backed a Tory budget and Tory financial rules, which will ultimately impose £18 billion of cuts to our public services and choke off our economic growth. Both have said they'll continue to impose a job-destroying Brexit, no matter the long-term damage to the economy, the NHS, or the soaring cost of living. Both have praised Margaret Thatcher. Both back creeping... I was expecting more folk to be disgruntled about Margaret Thatcher there, I'm not going to lie. Both back creeping privatisation of our NHS. Both have sought to undermine devolution and have tried to rule out transferring the powers that our parliaments need. And of course, both want to deny the people of Scotland and the people of Wales a choice over our futures. And friends, that is why the next Westminster election is so important, because it is becoming clearer every day that the ambitions of Sir Keir Starmer are not just a return of New Labour. He is now an active fanboy for new Thatcherism. Not for the... That's more like it, that's more like it. Not I do enjoy getting heckled, that was a good one. Not for the first time, Labour's leadership has abandoned its progressive politics in pursuit of power. It is therefore incumbent upon us, the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru, to offer that alternative. An alternative that will break up the cosy Westminster consensus. An alternative that demands real investment in the NHS and public services, a closer relationship with our friends in Europe, help with the cost of living crisis, action to tackle poverty, and an end to it, and finally, an ethical foreign policy for Gaza and the Middle East. That is the political ground we stand on and the values that we all collectively hold. Because until we achieve our independence, the SNP will always stand up for Scotland, be Scotland's voice, and stand up for progressive values at Westminster. And I know my Plaid colleagues will do the exact same for Wales. and we should be forever thankful for that. In conference, be in no doubt that they will chuck everything at us. In Scotland, we're used to that of late. But what they can't take away from us is what we have achieved for the people of our nation. And friends, in Scotland, a young person who is born today will be born into a baby box. As they grow, they will have access to 30 hours of term time free childcare. If their family is in poverty, they will be supported by a £25 child payment each and every week. At school, they will receive free school meals before 95% of Scotland's pupils go on to positive destinations: college, work, an apprenticeship, or university. University, which, by the way, in Scotland, is free from tuition fees. In order to get to those destinations, they'll do so with free bus travel or on nationalised trains with no peak fares. Move into their first home, and in Scotland they'll pay less council tax than anywhere else on these isles, whilst drinking fresh, crisp Scottish water right out the tap from another nationalised company. Look out their window and they'll see onshore and offshore wind farms that produce more annual electricity than we consume. Look harder and they'll see a green revolution on the horizon that will deliver tens of thousands of sustainable jobs for both them and their children. If they start to squint, they'll get a free eye test. Fall ill and they'll receive prescriptions. Grow old and they'll receive free personal care. Conference, that is the story of the Scottish National Party in government in Scotland. It is a story of delivery. It is a story where government protects the past and creates the future in partnership with others. It is a story I am very proud of. But friends, as you know, devolution is just the beginning. There is so much more we can do and must achieve. And for that to have we must always look beyond Westminster control. Because ultimately the best alternative is for all decisions to be made in Scotland for Scotland, for all decisions to be made in Wales for Wales. Ultimately, the best alternative is in fact the biggest alternative. The best alternative for all of us is independence. And no matter how many in Westminster deny that reality or even deny democracy, the relevance of that future is not going away. And it won't go away. In fact, our collective constitutional futures will remain at the very heart of politics, right across these isles. And that is especially true for those whose long-term future is at stake. Because broken Brexit Britain is no country for young people. That's why support for constitutional change across these isles is increasingly being driven and directed by our young people. Young people are wise enough to know that the future is for them to shape. With what they have witnessed at Westminster over the course of their lives, it is little wonder that the chance and the choice of a new future is so attractive for them. And it's exactly that hope and horizon that we need to offer. The hope of returning to the European Union, the chance to build that green economy, the opportunity to create a society that truly reflects our values and the choice of shaping constitutional change. By offering our young people, in fact, by offering all people that future, I'm confident that we will receive collectively the response that we so desire. Because that vision will always be far better than the reality of what Westminster has become. By limiting its own horizons and narrowing its own capacity for change, Westminster has made its own choice over its own future. The years to come will determine and define the choices we now make to create our own paths and our own future. That's something that I'm very much looking forward to. Thank you very much.